Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this Squared Up Coffee Break webinar. My name is Matthew Long, and this week we're going to be talking about a free security monitoring management pack from the community. This week I'm joined by Adam Kinniburgh.
Hi, Matthew.
Who is sort of a head of our infrastructure and support and systems here. So your classic sort of systems administrator kind of guy.
That's me.
And I'm also very pleased to be joined by Nathan Gau. Hi, Nathan.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. Nathan is the author of this management pack and has very kindly agreed to give up some of his time to join us today to discuss it. So thrilled to have him on. So guys, if you have any questions about this management pack or security auditing, please let us know and we'll try and bring these questions up throughout the webinar. This is your chance to talk to a real expert, so it's a good idea to leverage those questions. I'm going to jump straight into the slide deck. Unfortunately, Nathan's only able to dial in to this, so he can't actually see what we're showing on the screen, so we'll have to sort of make our best attempts to describe what we're currently looking at. But first slide here is just talking about our topic for today. So Nathan, and I should point out actually, Nathan, it's not just yourself, is it? You've used a team of sort of people to build this, but Nathan primarily has built a free management pack for SCOM that basically lights up loads of really important event monitoring that you should be doing in your environment as part of a sort of defense in depth strategy. So typically, I've got some quotes in a minute, but typically people have sort of dedicated tools and dedicated team, but actually you have a lot of the stuff that you need to catch a lot of events that will highlight that an attack is in progress or is occurring already in your environment. They're just not configured. And this management pack makes it sort of easy that once you've configured those to have them all in a central place, which is SCOM. So that's what we're going to discuss today, basically. And the other sort of key point we're going to talk about is an alert management strategy. You've got all this monitoring in place. It's picked up some events. Now what? Because that's a really important thing to sort of think about before time rather than in the middle of a potential attack or when you realize that you've been compromised for the last 4 months. Okay, so I'm going to sort of probe Nathan a bit with this one. So sort of, Nathan, could you talk us quickly through the management pack, sort of a high level, like what's the background for this and what inspired you to create it?
The inspiration occurred actually about 2 years ago. I was at Tech Ready, which is an internal Microsoft conference that we have that is kind of an internal training event. And I've been, just for the record, I've been kind of trying to angle my career in more of a security focus just from a career development standpoint. I have some background in security as it is, just because I've got my CISSP and my CEH and whatnot. So I do have some understanding of the security in general. But I was sitting in a class that they were doing called The Anatomy of an Attack. And one of our cyber experts was literally just going through log files and just kind of parsing out and just showing this like, hey, this log file is showing what the attacker is doing and pointing out the fact that we've got all this logging set up and turned on and available and running, and it's actually capturing what the bad guys are doing, but ultimately no one's responding to it. They don't know. And I was like, my primary responsibility is operations manager, which is actually pretty good at sifting through log files, right? I mean, that's what we do for a living. Now, what you see in a lot of, at least the environments I'm in, I can't speak for everyone, is they've got these really expensive data ingestion tools like Splunk or ArcSight or OMS or whatnot, where we're going to take all this log information and parse through it and try to tell you based off of that what's going on. And those tools work, by the way. I mean, ATA is a good tool. If you can afford to pay for it, it's an excellent tool. But it's expensive, right? Same with Splunk and ArcSight, or even SCOM configured to hit OMS in the cloud, right? There's costs associated with that. But sitting there going, well, the attackers are leaving breadcrumbs behind. Why can't we, look at the things that are going to be either unique to an attacker or, shall we say, fairly rare operational events that at the very least should be verified, right? And let people know they're going on, because oftentimes your security and your operations are, well, ideally, I should say, your security team and your operations team aren't going to necessarily report under the same person. Right? They will eventually get high up the chain, but they're separate teams and they're supposed to be completely separated from a separation of duty standpoint. So the thought being is, if somebody decides to add somebody to the domain admin group, right, that can happen from time to time. That's not necessarily a unusual bit. Well, it is an unusual business process. It shouldn't happen very often, right? So, but the thought being is, we can generate an alert and say, hey, remember the domain admins group was changed. The security team can then go to the operations staff and say, did you do this? And if the answer is yes, right, okay, we close the alert, we're done. But so operational events such as that, which shouldn't happen very often in an environment, combined with can we detect persistence mechanisms that attackers are leaving behind? Can we detect golden tickets if they're in use? Can we detect pass the hash if it's going on in your environment and whatnot? And so that's basically been the impetus behind this, is and a lot of it's just me in my lab, like, okay, let me do a pass the hash in my lab and see if I can create a rule that's unique to a pass the hash. Essentially, that was the logic behind it. So I've been working on it now for the better part of probably about a year and a half, to put this in perspective. So the idea came up just under 2 years ago, actually. I've been kind of kicking around as to how to architect it and whatnot, and it started with me just working at a console, and I quickly realized I needed to get beyond just simple console offering, and so now I'm using the SAE, using a full-fledged offering suite. I've added a couple of folks to the team, so if you know the name Brad Watts or Lynn Tager, if you know either of those guys, both of them have had some involvement. Brad's been doing a lot of reporting for me. So all the reports that are in there right now, Brad did all of those.
What really impressed me as well with the manager pack is you've kind of targeted a lot of this at trying to reduce the noise as well. So like if you get an alert from this management pack,
right,
it's because either you configured it or this is an attack. Like pass the hash is not like a normal operational process. That means there is something wrong in your environment.
Yeah. So just about everything in this management pack. So I've had this management pack running in my environment constantly, obviously, and I turned a lot of things off because of noise that was generated. So if you read my initial article on how to detect pass the hash, I have 3 rules set up. 2 of those are shut off right now because of the noise.
Yeah.
Because ultimately they were generating too much. Now, I will note somebody reached out to me about a month ago at this point about restricted RDP and the one pass the hash rule that's on. I haven't had a chance to see if that can be replicated. So there might be some noise associated with that too, or I might be able to tune it down finer. I just haven't had a chance to look at it in too much detail yet. The goal is quiet. That is very much the goal, is to keep it quiet.
Right.
So I'm not going to just generate you an alert for the sake of alert. I don't want that. Matter of fact, some of the like when I started it, like if you've imported this, you probably noticed if you had Server 2008 R2 or below systems, right, you generated a lot of noise on W digest vulnerability that's not been fixed in your environment. That's a really good example of one that I'm probably going to rewrite as a report, with the idea of actually using reporting as a means to, we just drop it in, we collect the information, and then you can run reports to see if these vulnerabilities are here, that kind of thing. To further reduce noise, because
yeah, looking down the list, like I've brought the slide. We've got like domain admin, enterprise admin, schema group admin changes, pass the hash, detection of services on domain controllers, local groups being modified, systems being powered on and off. These are all things that either shouldn't occur in an environment or that your change control should have documented that these are going on.
Correct. And some of these are off by default. Just like systems powered off, for instance, that's off by default, right? So
right.
Because that will happen in an environment. I hate to say it, right?
Yeah. I mean, we already have enough problems in SCOM anyway, right? With people turning systems off and not putting them into maintenance mode. So one extra alert is just adding fuel to the fire.
Right. So there's definitely some of that where, if we've thrown that stuff in there, but it's off, and it's really up to you to decide if there's a good business process you can wrap around it to turn it on, for the record.
Right. So we've actually imported this into our environment. So let's go and have a look at some of the stuff we've actually got configured here. So it's important to note that, as Nathan's mentioned, the management pack does have some rules enabled by default. Other aspects of this management pack are turned on by both you enabling the rule and also you configuring your GPO or auditing settings or features of Windows like app locker or event forwarding. So you do need to go and read the guide, which is on the link there on the screen, to go and read what you have to enable. Just importing this management pack by itself isn't actually going to go and light up all these features, but we followed Nathan's guide there, which is very in-depth, and we've got this enabled. So once you've imported the management pack, you will have a security monitoring set of views, and you can see here we've got quite a bit of noise going on in our environment. Now, that is partly because we've a company who we've embraced Azure quite a bit, so we've got a lot of boxes that are in our sort of sales domain, which we monitor online. And as you can see, we've got a lot of repeated logon attempts. In fact, we have one box here that has 11,000 logon events in the past 4 days. So the bad guys are definitely trying to get in. But what's interesting about this is, again, even just by configuring some GPOs and pushing them out, I've actually had Adam's team have been playing with this, and they've managed to create some pretty immediately telling events when doing certain actions. So, for example, where's my local admins group modified monitor here? So this is telling us, okay, on this particular box, on this scrupsec box, we've got, a user account, A Thompson has come and configured a new user account called Hacksaw, and he's added that to the local admins group. I'm pretty sure I'd have to go to change control to find out whether or not that's that should actually be in there. But the key point is, like, now we can see, what's going on in the environment, and the management pack has got rules in there for monitoring GPO changes as well, which is one of those things where GPO should not be changing very often. They should certainly have a change control process attached to them. And actually the resultant value should even be reviewed anyway, because you want to make sure that even if the change was authorized, has the change been implemented correctly and the right value been assigned. So immediately we're able to get sort of visibility with that stuff just by enabling some GPOs, letting that replicate throughout the environment. So that's actually a really easy sort of win for us. And we actually found as well, a couple of vulnerabilities in our environment based around boxes having public IPs that shouldn't have had and things like that. So nothing serious was found, but it certainly did open a few eyes here, Adam, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We rolled it out based on Nathan's very sort of comprehensive guidance, taking the advice to sort of build all the GPOs from scratch, so you really get a sort of a good idea of what you're enabling and where you're enabling it. Mm-hmm. Just following the guide. And yeah, you get some really great monitoring sort of just right there out of the box almost.
So it's worth noting, Nathan, you have actually enabled, you have a sample GPO available for download, but I guess, so one of the recommendations is maybe don't use it, just so that you know what's actually in your GPO.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, I wouldn't just import and go. I mean, we're turning on auditing, obviously, which can have impact on your environment. But you've got it there, so you can see what I've turned on in my lab environment in order to get it working. So,
yep.
I think you do have a slide talking about the ones we recommend turning on for sure.
Yeah. So we'll come to that in a bit.
Let's get to that when we get there.
Yep.
But yeah.
And it's worth noting as well that this management pack, unlike a lot of SCOM management packs that you'd see, this one's quite rule-based. There's not a lot of monitors in here per se. And that's partly because we don't want these alerts closing, right? Like, we want to see them and action them. And I think a key sort of part of this, I'm going to flip back to the slides, is talking about sort of alert management process, because, you don't want these things resetting on a timer. You don't want them to go into a black hole and ignore them. Like, someone is repeatedly trying to log on or exploiting some kind of vulnerability, or there is a persistent threat here based on some sort of service being created. Someone should be actioning these. And I think Nathan also has a great blog post on sort of alert management process. But I think the key thing here is, as with any management pack, but especially a security MP, that someone has to be responsible for responding to the alerts that this MP raises. It's not good enough just to have a notification subscription set to fire these events off to a DL and hope that someone on that group will look at it, and maybe they look at it this week, maybe they don't. Like, the whole point of this is that, these rules are designed to quickly be able to see, this is what's happening in our environment. Was this authorized, or is this suspicious? And then, either if you have an integrated operations and security team, then great, now you can respond to that. If you don't, then these can then be forwarded on maybe from tier 1 or tier 2 support up to the security team, so they can now respond, if their existing tools haven't already identified this particular problem. And I guess that's a key point you raised in your blog as well, Nathan, is this isn't like a one catch-all solution. This is all about defense in depth, right?
Correct.
And the other sort of key point of this is that normal business activities will generate alerts, and those need to be verified. Like, you might see another alert, there's another, login of a sort of high privileged account on this box. It's probably just someone doing some admin work, but you need to actually verify that. Yes, it's annoying, but you have to go and do it, because otherwise this would be the time that it's not a normal user. And realistically, and I've been doing some reading about this for the webinar this week, realistically, once attackers compromise your AD environment, you're kind of done, really, aren't you? Like, there's no rebuilding that AD environment. You're going to have to burn it down and start again. So you really need to sort of be aware of this kind of thing and close the door on attackers as soon as you can. And then the third thing, which I think is really key, is that it's really important to document what you're monitoring and what you're not monitoring. Like, if you have sort of event that you decide, actually, we're not looking at this, you need to have that down. So, Adam, you were sort of telling me about one of your previous gigs, so some issues you had with success monitoring, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very common when you're sort of dealing with advanced auditing to just sort of turn it all on and find that all of a sudden your sort of amazing high-end web servers are now sort of grinding to a halt because you're just, 3,000 events per second on busy servers is not uncommon, and yet that was 3,000. And when sort of auditing becomes your bottleneck in performance, you kind of want to just turn it off. So it all comes back to sort of when you're deploying this, it needs to be targeted. It needs to be enabled in a way that makes sense, and the rules that you're generating, the alerts that you're generating aren't just sort of noise that you don't want to deal with. It's very common, we all know in sort of SCOM, you get those very repetitive alerts, you just silence them when actually there is a problem that nobody just wants to deal with, basically. So, and it's exactly the same for this. It's all about making sure that what you're getting these alerts from is fine-tuned, and not just relying on, your like $10,000 firewall for protection. We all know that, they aren't the end of it. Just cutting your network off from the internet's rarely an option,
Yep.
even though, that's commonplace in my experience in sort of law enforcement kind of environments. You just sort of, you have your secure network, but that doesn't stop. There's always going to be a link out to something, no matter how sort of well protected it is. You always need to be monitoring and assuming that people have already got in, and looking, always assume breach, I guess, is
that's
kind
the
of
sort of
rule with
mantra,
that.
isn't it? Like, assume it's breached and then mitigate what can happen with that, rather than assume they can't get in and then go, well, if they get in, we're screwed, so we'll just make sure they can't get in. Like, that's not a good plan.
Absolutely.
And I guess like the key point of like documenting what's not being monitored. Let's say you can't turn on full auditing for this particular app because it's going to kill it.
Yeah.
We'll document that, so at least if you do have a breach, like, you and your department are aware of what you're not monitoring for, what the potential vectors could be, and maybe you can find a different way to mitigate that particular
exactly.
problem.
You can look at the sort of like lateral steps that could be taken from that system. Looking at like Active Directory, the sort of red forest design of having sort of tiered Active Directory. So lateral movement is possible, but up and down movement to sort of more restricted domains is not. So there's a lot about structure, and certainly business process is a huge part of security.
Yep. So Nathan has a really nice blog post, The Anatomy of a Good SCOM Alert Management Process. It's a 3-part sort of session, and I recommend you go and read that, not just if I mentioned it on the coffee breaks before, actually, but this is good not just from a security standpoint, but actually just from if you're struggling to get traction with SCOM and people in your environment aren't sort of engaged with it and looking at it, like this series of blog posts really talks about sort of some of the challenges that you may be facing and like why this is a problem, and kind of gives you some good steps to follow in order to actually get this on board. A large one being get management involved, because you can't just stand this up as a tool. Technology by itself won't solve this problem. You can't just install SCOM, follow some wizards, import some MPs, and you're done. This really requires sort of organizational change. So Nathan mentioned some recommendations. So we've got a slide here where we asked him just before the webinar started, like, what are your sort of top 3 items? Because sometimes, you're going to put this management pack in, or I need to turn some features on. Often there's pushback from the rest of the organization, especially if you're just the SCOM guy and you're not, in a position to enable this stuff yourself. So we said to Nathan, right, if you've got limited resources, maybe there's political issues or you're very busy or whatever else, and you can only turn 3 things on. What are your sort of 3 go-tos? So the first one you highlighted, Nathan, was Windows event forwarding. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So the bulk of your intrusions are going to, at least in some capacity, start at the desktop level, right? Security people operate under the concept of an assumed breach, and the reality is that users are going to click on that phishing email because it looks like it came from Amazon, so we're good to go, right? And they had an Amazon order. It's Christmas time. They're expecting something. But I mean, I want to say that the national average right now is, no matter how much we try to educate our end users, roughly 10 to 20% of them are still going to click on that phishing email. So desktops, we assume, get compromised altogether. So, from a security standpoint, obviously that's where tiered account structure is, and making sure that the desktops just go straight into the server tier, that there's a management network, and they've got to find the management layer and whatnot. But with, a lot of the rules that I have in this are also targeted at Windows Event Collector servers, which is a separate discovery management pack I wrote. And in so doing, you can detect if you've got app locker and all that kind of stuff turned on. We can detect when these tools are sitting on a desktop, and we can go ahead and grab the desktop and reimage it, and ideally get it while they're still moving around in the environment, that type of thing. So definitely some advantage there to being able to responding to threats in your tier 2 environments quickly. You get some visibility into it. And antivirus can sort of do that sometimes, but antivirus can be disabled. It can be worked around. I'm not going to lie to you when I say that a sophisticated attacker isn't going to be using the commercially downloadable version of Mimikatz. They'll have something that does what Mimikatz does, but it's not going to be detectable by AV. I'm not necessarily going to be able to pick that up with AppLocker, obviously, but ideally, hopefully, I can catch the breadcrumbs, right? That's leaving behind to keep the goal.
And I guess that's why you had this recommendation to turn on process auditing as well. Like, okay, granted, you can't catch every single tool, but if you can see what processes are being started on a box, you'll find them that way as well.
And that's actually, if I were to talk about what I'm moving towards in terms of the next release, I'm hoping to release sometime next year. I'd like to release an updated version of this. It will also be sealed, by the way, for the record.
Oh, cool.
There'll be a sealed and unsealed version, but that's one of the next agenda items. But 4688 events, which is process tracking, there's a lot of really, really, really cool stuff that you can get that's unique to a bad guy. That's tracked through 4688. So I'm not going to lie to you, that's going to flood your security logs. So be careful. You may not be able to do that. I mean, you turn on 4688, you're going to see a lot of 4688. But I can tell you in the next revision, I'm definitely going to be targeting, the next release is going to have a lot more 4688 based detections in it, just for the record. So yeah, process auditing or process tracking or whatever that CPO is, that would definitely be a big one. And I'm trying to remember what the next one was. I think the next one was AppLocker.
It's AppLocker, yeah. So the idea here is to maybe not catch the most sophisticated attackers, but get all the script kiddies and get the people who sort of maybe aren't aware of this.
Yeah, I got a nice little blog post on that one. I set up an Azure lab that was exposed to the world, and it took about 6 months, but they eventually got in. That was a script kiddie, but it was exposed to RDP. I didn't secure it. I didn't do anything like that. I just wanted to see what it would look like, and when I got in, it lit up. So it did what it was supposed to do, and that was a script kiddie. And so basically, they were using Mimikatz in my environment. They called it Google Chrome or something like. They had it installed in something that looked like Google, basically. So something that would be somewhat more not as noticeable, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And but when they started using it, as soon as they started using it, it lit up. All my AppLocker rules in particular lit up. So yeah, definitely some benefit there. One more nod on the slide that if you could really, really do, I think I've got a link off to Jessica Payne's article on tracking privileged accounts. So I've got detections for that built in, but you've got to turn that on, okay? Which means that when that domain admin signs on, you get a record of, that domain admin signed on, you get an alert on it, that kind of thing. That would be another one that I would definitely keep an eye on, because you shouldn't have, if you're doing security right, domain admins shouldn't be signing on anywhere. Right. Except for domain controllers when they're doing domain admin level things, right? So that's another one that if you can turn that on, that's good info.
Yeah, it still surprises me how often they log onto their desktop as a domain admin, and it's like, why are you?
Because it's much easier to do everything.
No, I know that, Adam. However, but even if you
that's how pass the hash works too. When you do that, if they're sitting on your desktop, you're done at that point.
But that's the maddening thing. There is even the sort of point you make is only logging onto domain controllers. It's one thing to say, but it's annoying to have an escalation account. But okay, fine. But even then, your escalation account shouldn't be a domain admin. Have a group that manages servers and not the domain controllers. And you should only be logging in as a domain admin to do domain administration level stuff. Domain shouldn't equal all my servers. So that one always surprises me as well, where we're enterprise admins and schema admins all the time. Why? Oh, because it's just easy to have one account that does it all.
Correct.
Great. That doesn't work very well with defense in depth or a sort of assume breach strategy. So yeah, definitely, I think that's a good one actually. And if you look through Nathan's blog, he spent a long time blogging lots and lots of posts. So if you go through it, the initial post that's linked to from our slide deck, and obviously that'll be on our blog as well, has 8 or 9 different articles that link off to other articles. So it's definitely worth reading this stuff through. It will take you an afternoon, but you really go into a huge amount of depth in terms of what's available, what can be turned on, how you can detect things, not just things that are in the management pack, but also things that you could then go and add and extend if you want to. And it's great to hear that you're going to be updating the management pack as well, and sort of keep this going forward. On that note, actually, if you guys haven't caught the webinar earlier on, Squared Up today have announced that we've released a community management pack catalog, which is basically a management pack that you can import into SCOM that then shows you like awesome community management packs that are available, nearly all of which are free. And then you can search for those and be notified if there's an update as well. So Nathan, and these are not controlled by us. This is actually a repository in GitHub. So the community can come together, add new additions. Authors can, include readmes and say they've updated management packs as well. And Nathan's management pack is in here. So if you download and install this, you can go into the Discover pack and you can see there's the security monitoring MP. And presumably when you update that, we'll be able to bump the version number there and you'll be told that Nathan's got some stuff in here and, one-click download and bring that in. So that should hopefully help keep you guys sort of engaged with Nathan's efforts. Okay, so we've got a bit of a sort of time limit today, so I'm going to wrap things up, but I'm going to want to once again thank Nathan for joining us today. I know you've got an incredibly busy schedule, and it's great to have you on, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. If you have any questions, guys, while you're on, feel free to ask this now, and we'll just try and get you some answers, but in the meantime, I'm going to wrap up the webinar. So, as always, if you haven't taken our squareup.com topics survey, please do so. We use this to understand what kind of things you guys are interested in hearing about. So if you like this session today and want to hear more about another community management pack that you feel we should really know about, please go to squareup.com/topics. You can vote your favorite topics there from ones that we've suggested. And there's also a free text field so you can suggest any topics that you might like to see in the future as well. And we do value that feedback and we do take it into account, so it's worth doing. If you want to see what's coming up next, you can go to squareup.com/coffee-break-series, where there is a sign-up form for this webinar, so you can send it to a colleague or friend. And in addition to that, we publish the schedule of what's coming up next, so you can see and plan accordingly. The recordings and slides are published via our blog at squareup.com/blog, along with a wealth of other great content, so it's definitely worth checking that out. And likewise, there's quite a few long links in this document, so if you don't feel like typing that all out, you can go and grab the links from that blog post. That's typically available about 24 hours after the live webinar, so Wednesday, the 25th. And we also have a YouTube playlist for this series as well, which has got all previous 29 episodes. So there's like several days worth of Squared Up content, which isn't just on Squared Up, it's also on SCOM and enterprise monitoring in general. I mean, today we've been looking at something that isn't specific to Squared Up. So if you're an evaluating customer right now looking at this, or just a SCOM guy who's come across this on YouTube, go and look at this. It's not specifically to Squared Up. This is a management pack that you can get some great value out of today. So I'm going to flip over to Q&A now. Thank you very much for joining us, guys.
Thanks, Matthew.
No worries. And next week we should have some more good community stuff for you. So thanks again, Nathan. Thank you, Adam. And thanks everyone for joining us. Bye-bye.